The Catholic Church and homosexuality are a tale as old as time. I mean, who makes an institution around not having to marry women and wearing that much lace? But in all seriousness, the Catholic Church's stance on homosexuality always makes headlines. The Church says you can't be gay, and today I want to get past the debate over should gay people obey the Church, the obvious answer being no, or why the Church holds this outdated position, but rather focus on the most glaring hole in the Catholic Church. They don't know what to do with gay people if the gay people do listen. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, a sort of summary of major church teaching, says that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered and can never be permitted. Contrary to popular headlines in which Pope Francis tends to yap on planes about taking a nicer approach to homosexuality, he has never, and the Church will never, change its core teaching that being gay can never be allowed. You can be attracted to members of the same sex, and that's not sinful. However, actually living your life as an out and proud gay person and falling in love is never permitted. An official 1986 document says, although the particular inclination of the homosexual person is not a sin, it is more or less a strong tendency ordered towards an intrinsic moral evil, and thus the inclination itself must be seen as an objective disorder. The Catechism goes on to say that gay people should strive to remain chaste and have disinterested friendships, and after a few paragraphs saying, no, you can't do this, the Catechism does not elaborate any further. So that's your crash course on official church teaching, but the question becomes, the Church says I can be attracted to men, I just can't ever fall in love. What do I do now? And if you were to pull a cross-section of Catholic priests, theologians, Vatican officials, and other church officials who affirm this teaching, and ask the question, so what should gay people do? You're going to get a complex mix of solutions that each person claims is official church teaching, yet the person next to them will disagree but claim church authority, and the person next to that person will disagree with the first two and say they're encouraging sin. It's disagreement under the guise of infallibility all the way down. So let's start our adventure. For those who haven't plumbed the depths of 2,000 years worth of both official documents and hot takes from Catholic saints, the most important thing in a Catholic's life is their vocation. Discerning one's vocation is the most important decision a young Catholic thinks about. This comes from the Latin word vocare, or to call. Vocation is what they believe God is calling them to in life. And once you have your vocation, you gotta stick to your vocation for the rest of your life. This is God's path for your life. God's either calling you to become a religious, that is a priest, monk, sister, or nun, or to married life. And whichever path you go down, you gotta stay the course. I can't stress how important this is to faithful Catholics. So if you're a gay Catholic who's decided to forsake love to be in the Church's favor, you might say, well, if I'm gonna be celibate the rest of my life, I should become a priest or a nun. Wrong. In 2005, the Vatican put out an official document saying that the Church cannot admit to the seminary or to holy orders those who practice homosexuality, present deep-seated homosexual tendencies, or support the so-called gay culture. And even Pope Francis, the lovely woke bishop, has even reaffirmed this. This document isn't talking about people who are in a relationship, it's talking about anyone that is attracted to members of the same sex, even if they're living celibate and living in accordance with church teaching. Now you might say, well, my diocese or my religious community accepts celibate gays, and that's true. Many bishops and abbots disregard these rulings, and half of priests are gay, in fact. But here's the thing, this often ends in blackmail, conversion therapy, still remaining in the closet, and even sexual assault. Because if you complain about what's happening to you, you're gonna have to admit that you shouldn't be there, per the Vatican guidelines to the authorities. I personally know a number of priests and former priests whose this has happened to. This isn't hypothetical. And side note, this document outlines a perceived difference in transitory same-sex attractions that can be overcome in permanent same-sex attractions, and this document gives young, naive Catholics the idea that going to conversion therapy so they become priests or religious is a good idea. But we know that the consequences of reparative therapy, statistically speaking, have horrendous outcomes. I'd encourage you to listen to the Dear Alana podcast outlining how reparative therapy to become a nun led a teenage girl to not be here anymore. So if you want to accept church teaching as a gay person in the Church, being a priest is out of the question. So then you look at the next option, just sucking it up and getting married to someone to whom you're not attracted. I mean, after all, in Catholic marriage, love, sexual compatibility, romance, or any modern conception of love isn't required, and in many cases is discouraged. Rather, marriage is about finding a virtuous person you can lead to heaven and cranking out as many babies as you can to also bring to heaven with you. But this isn't recommended by Catholics for obvious reasons. So-called mixed orientation marriages just flat out don't work. I got a hard enough time dating men. How in the hell do you convince women to marry you after you say, well, I'm not sexually attracted to you or even romantically, but we can still get married and we can make babies if I cover my eyes and you cut your hair short? Like, bruh, even if you can get married, those marriages just don't work if we look at the statistics. So the second vocation is off the table: no priesthood or religious life and no marriage. So the next thing is like, wow, so I'll just be single, right? A lot of mainstream Catholic chastity speakers like Jason Everts or famous priests like Father Mike Schmitz of the world answer will make church teaching sound all cutesy and demure and be like, oh, you can live an awesome fulfilled life as a chaste celibate Catholic with same-sex attraction, and you can be the first saint with same-sex attractions. But once you get past Catholics having to seem all polite when talking to non-Catholics and you get into these hardcore insular communities, which talk very differently than the outside world, the answer is like, no, you can't really be single. Well, like, you can be single, but if you're just not going to be as virtuous as a single person as you would in a real vocation. And I'm sure I'll get comments saying being single is a real vocation, and some dioceses even talk about the single vocation. But here's the thing. No major Vatican document from the latter half of the 20th century that talks about vocations says that being single is a vocation. The church is officially silent on the matter. And dare you get into pre-Vatican II circles, a meeting of all the world's bishops in the 1960s that opened the church up to the modern world, you're going to be flamed for staying single. Being single is a default state, not a real vocation. Perhaps the most famous traditional priest in the US, a self-described exorcist. Yes, these people still believe that demons can take over your body if you look at too many scantily clad models on billboards, and insist that various races often are affected by certain demons. Father Chad Ripperger makes the point that vocations get us to heaven because they require us to submit our will to God's through responsibility and sacrifice. As a priest, you take vows of obedience to literally do anything that your superior tells you, and as a married person, you literally can never divorce your spouse, and you can't use birth control, so you have a lot of kids, and then you gotta raise those kids. But as a single person, you aren't chained to any asinine responsibilities, and thus you're going to keep doing your will and never mature in a Catholic sense. So as a gay Catholic, if you stay single, you'll forever get glares from old Catholic grandmas and always get this like passive-aggressive commentary about how if you really love God, you'd pick a vocation. Except you literally fucking can't. This is why there's a lot of empty chairs at the table of our human family. There's a lot of young queer people that get told that the only way to be valuable is to have a vocation, and when they can't because they're gay and exhaust all the options, they come to the conclusion that life isn't for them. And a lot of this happens with them suffering in silence for years on end because they're scared to tell anyone. Because it's shameful to be attracted to men when God designs us to be attracted to women. And if they were to talk with their parents, they know they might be kicked out of the house or worse. Like, congratulations, apologist. You successfully backed a scared, vulnerable 14-year-old off a cliff, and they're not alive anymore. I'm glad you found peace in the church. There's a lot of people who don't. And they tried harder than you ever will, and they go to more masses, and they prayed more, and they knew the Lord more than you ever will. But I'm glad you can quote the Summa and talk about an inanimate piece of bread from Argentina. So let's put the biggest decision in Catholics' life, what vocation they have, aside. Let's not even worry about how we're becoming virtuous through a vocation and just saying, I'll think about that later. It's not a mortal sin to have my vocation figured out, so I'll just be super Catholic in the meantime. First step in existing in the community is meeting people, and dare I say, making friends. Male and female interactions in Catholicism are highly regulated, scrutinized even. Why? Men and women are fundamentally different and represent the near occasion of sin. That's Catholic speak for saying if men and women hang out just as friends, it's going to end in sin, and even being in the situation that allows for sin is in and of itself sinful. The 2005 document that says gay men can't be priests also says such persons in fact find themselves in a situation that gravely hinders them from relating correctly to men and women. You're fundamentally broken because you're gay. And so just to use one example, traditional Catholic men don't frequent beaches that have women in bathing suits because that would be a temptation. But they go swimming with each other as groups of guys. But if you're a gay man, you're not allowed to be with a woman swimming because of gender roles. But then, should that same standard be applied to you and that you shouldn't be around men in swimsuits? You run into problems all the way down. You can't be friends with too many women or get too close to them because of these strict gender roles. But if you apply that reasoning behind these strict gender roles, social etiquette and separation, then you have to apply them to men. But the church commands you to have close male friends to relate to authentically. But at the same time, the way to cure yourself of attractions to men is to have close, disinterested, or platonic friends. But doing that would also scandalize other men if they knew you were gay. And if you think secular men have fragile egos, just wait until you meet Catholic men. Some are great when you say you're gay, and some short circuit and start attacking you. Relating better with women is a defect, because it means you are effeminate, which is the pejorative term when a man is feminine. And if you only make male friends, you're in the near occasion of sin and your masculinity isn't strong enough to date women. You can't win this. So you shut up, don't tell anyone, hold the secret tight to your chest for years on end out of fear that if anyone knew, your life as you know it would be ruined. But you see, this weighs on you. You feel like you're living a lie. Your body counts the cost, this low-grade fear held over all of the years. You have nightmares about what would happen if you told one person and that other person told others. Your life starts giving you trauma, all because you're trying to love God more than everyone else around you. People that really love God aren't attracted to men. And so let's go back to chapter 1, which is, like a lot of Catholic evangelists say, that it's not sinful to be attracted to members of the same sex. We all have crosses to bear. But once you get beyond the happy-pappy apologetics that try to make the church seem cool in the modern world, you sit down in the pews hearing homily after homily, spending hours in prayer, reading the saints, involving yourself in parish life, go to confession every week, but you feel different. I mean, after all, the Catechism describes same-sex attractions as intrinsically disordered. Official documents say an overly benign interpretation that was given to homosexual condition itself, some going so far as to call it neutral or even good. And you hear all of these homilies about the complementarity of men and women and becoming an authentic biblical man or woman. You try fitting into these narrow gender roles, and then you start crying one day while in front of the Blessed Sacrament, asking God why he made you disordered. So you start asking around and read more about the church teaching and start realizing if you were whole and good, your same-sex attractions wouldn't be there. Being same-sex attracted might not be sinful, but you sure are defective. And if you start becoming more and more traditional, you start hearing that there is hope. You can fix your masculinity or femininity and pray that you can be straight, and all the vocations are back on the table, and you can be a normal, faithful Catholic. So you start working on connecting with men authentically, and you start doing manly things, and you make male friends. You start making deals with God that if he makes you straight, you'll do something in return. And every morning you wake up and hope that today is finally the day that you're straight. And then we encounter so-called reparative therapy. Dr. Nicolosi, founder of the now underground discredited movement, has a simple thesis, that your being gay is really just an attachment issue in early childhood. You latch onto one parent too much and turn the exotic into the erotic, so you start the books and go to conversion therapy, and as they call it change-allowing therapy, talk about doublespeak, and the more you get into it, the more that you have hope that it's possible. But you hate yourself. You blame your childhood. You see yourself as dirty and broken and pathetic, and if you just did the work and related to men better, you'd be straight. And the years go by and you build up a loathing so deep you begin to wonder if death is the only way out of this broken life. And I get it. If you're a straight apologist just following the word games, you're going to say, well, this isn't church teaching. And to your point, the church is quite litigious in how it phrases things and how it officially presents things. But here's the thing. If we borrow the reasonable person concept from law, a reasonable person would see and quickly find to understand that the logical conclusion, the lived reality of gay Catholics who remained faithful to the church for more than a few years develop a staggering high rate of self-hatred due to church teaching. All implications, assessments, and logical conclusions of the church's carefully worded hate end up as hate. The actual fucking statistics and reality around so-called conversion therapy tell a different story than the word games played by Catholic officials. Who do you trust more, science or snake oil salesmen? And now's the point in the script where I would pull up an opposing study that supports the Catholic Church's position, but there's nothing. Like, not a single study. There's anecdotes, there's influencers, there's legends, but there's not a single long-term study on what it means to be a celibate gay Catholic in the church. And not only are there no studies, there's barely anybody that does this. Gay yet celibate Catholics are only whispered about. They're elusive because there are barely any. Most studies show that between 3 and 15% of people are born significantly not straight and or gender non-conforming. This is epigenetic, and thus there aren't any populations immune from giving birth to queer folks. So we would expect that, let's use an American parish as an example with 2,000 people enrolled, and if let's say 90% of those people were born and raised Catholic as opposed to converts, we'd expect around 50 to 200 of those people to be gay. But we don't see that. So let's maybe say half of those born Catholic and gay leave the church. We'd find 25 to 100 folks, but we don't see that. Let's say 90% of those apostatize, we'd expect 50 to 20 queer folks living in the church teaching, but we don't even see that. And you're hard-pressed to find even in the largest parishes people are openly same-sex attracted. Why do I bring up these stats? To show you that the Catholic Church is asking people to live a life that there is nothing known about. There's no long-term studies with any even half-decent sample sizes of people that live permanently in this lifestyle. Even the influencers, they don't permanently stay as faithful same-sex attracted Catholics for any period of time. They don't have any permanence in life. We have hordes of studies with hundreds of thousands of people on what it means to live a good marriage. Heck, there's even tens of thousands of priests who've been in studies, and we know how to give priests the best tools to live a fully actualized life. But here's the thing. The Catholic Church has absolutely no game plan for you as a gay Catholic. There's nothing known about the life you're forced to endure, apart from the studies that show it leads to death. Even the anecdotes are failing. The top ex-gay influencers across the Christian world leave. The zealous same-sex attracted influencers that the Catholic world grasps onto like straws have only been doing it for a handful of years. The Catholic Church is asking you to put away all of medical science, all of psychology, all of sociology, all of modern wisdom, all of the long-term studies, all of the cultural models for you to be their guinea pig. They don't have a shred of proof that living as a celibate gay Catholic is possible or even fulfilling. And all the studies, all the scientists, all the experts have proven time and time again that the life the church asks you to leave is deadly. And before you say with God nothing is impossible, I need you to know that there's been someone in your exact same shoes saying the exact same thing. They prayed more fervently than you. They went to more masses than you. They knew the Lord more than you. They understood even more theology than you did. Except they're not here anymore to tell you how it turned out. And I know your brain is telling you in your heart that even to doubt that the Lord won't provide is a sin in of itself. I don't have the ability to tell you in strong enough terms. At some point you need to use your brain and not someone whose interest is first and foremost in saying the right thing to keep you in the church. You're listening to somebody who says that they have your best interest at heart, except that best interest isn't rooted in anything we can observe, anything we can research, anything we can find out anything more about. You're being told emotional phrases that hype yourself up for heaven, and that if you just listen, you'll have true peace on this earth. Except that doesn't happen in reality. You're listening to lies. Either everything we can use to research this topic from the most independent independent studies really is ran by Satan, or someone simply scaring you into staying compliant by saying it is. The Catholic Church is asking of you straight up doesn't work. I don't know to put it in terms that can be strong enough. I don't care about theological terms. This is like when we look at the reality, this life doesn't work. If you think true peace can only be found in the Lord, you clearly have not lived. At some point, you got to break the arbitrary rules, or at some point, they're going to break you. The Catholic Church doesn't know what to do with you as a queer person. If you think the world needs more of this type of content, I want to plug my new Patreon to help support this type of work. For as little as $1 a month, you can join our Discord community, where we're talking about being queer, being straight, being Catholic, being ex-Catholic. And then on those upper tiers, you're going to be able to provide input on ideas, to be able to workshop these in real time, to get early access to these posts, to get one-on-one access to myself. I have the skills and I have the equipment as my full-time job as a videographer to make more of this type of content. So if you think the world needs more of this type of content, go check out my new Patreon.